Okay. So yeah, we are like 1 minute to the kickoff here as we kind of jump in. So for our, I'm Kara, for those of you who haven't officially met me before. This is our second annual virtual book fair. So this is something that I found really fun and empowering, with the fact that so many mental health professionals and professionals in general are writing books. So that was kind of the inspiration for this event. As a 8-time published author myself, I think I'm a little addicted, and I just love being with other people who have written books, because I think there's just an energy there that's pretty fun. So that is why we're here today, with 10 of our amazing authors coming on 10 minutes each, talking about their process to become an author, their book, anything they want us to know, and some Q&A if they have time and are comfortable answering questions. On the back end, I will be doing a raffle, so I will be notifying who wins a copy of each book and connect authors to those winners. So for anyone watching this back, that's not you, but anyone who's here live, you have an option to win some of these amazing books. Partly made possible by our sponsors. We have a sponsor in the room right now. We have a sponsor at the end of the event. So the MedWriters is our sponsor that you're going to hear from now, if we're open to that. So thank you for all being here.
Thanks, Kara. So my name is Andrea. As Kara said, I'm with the MedWriters. So the MedWriters is a team that consists mostly of PhD level biomedical scientists, MDs, and PharmDs. So a variety of backgrounds. We have writers with degrees in psychology, neuroscience, immunology, cellular molecular biology, cancer, all the ologies that kind of fall under the life sciences. And we do writing that kind of falls into two main buckets, I guess. You have the more technical writing, of course, as you can imagine, scientists and doctors writing papers for peer-reviewed journals and grant proposals and that kind of stuff. But actually, a large portion of what we do is writing for a lay audience, more marketing type writing. So we worked on book projects. One we just recently finished, just in January, actually, we wrote a 300-page book for the Alzheimer's Caregivers Association. So the purpose of that book was basically to be a go-to for any issues or questions that a caregiver might have, somebody who's taking care of a patient with Alzheimer's. So that's an example, of a book project. Usually when we work with doctors on their books, we're usually ghostwriters. But we also do a lot of stuff that's useful to healthcare providers, such as website content, blog articles, copy for patient handouts, drug information, booklets, all of that type of stuff. So basically anything that you may need written, whether it's technical or more sales, marketing in nature. And I think we've done a really good job of, curating a group of writers that, even though they have that, scientific medical background, they're actually really good writers as well. Because I'm sure that you've seen that in your careers, that oftentimes the people, that have that kind of in-depth knowledge of the subject matter, they're not necessarily the best writers, especially if it's writing for the common person. But I think we've put together a really good team that they know the science, but they're also great at writing, for anybody, making it digestible and understandable so that it really can benefit people. So that's basically what we do.
Yeah. Any questions for our sponsor as you're hearing about the services? I also put in the chat a link to the flyer that they provided of all the things that they do, the services they offer. Any questions for our sponsor today? Some of you are ghostwriting. It's a thing. Especially if you're super busy in your world. It's a wonderful resource
and that's
that
the
way.
thing, right? Because with some clients that we work with, it's not that they can't write, but they just don't have the time. I mean, especially if you're a doctor running a practice, when do you have time to write a whole book, right? So in some cases, that's why doctors come to us, because they just don't have the time to do it themselves.
Yeah. Or they're not feeling called to carve out that time. So obviously, with our audience being mostly busy therapists, I think they can relate to that, of just where do I put my time freedom? What do I allocate towards this? Knowing that they have a goal of writing a book or putting out a book, or a second, third, fifth, 20th book, depending on what they've done.
Yeah, or maybe they're looking to bring more patients into their clinic, and so they really need to work on their website. Because maybe their website's not getting much traffic, not a lot of people are finding them when they're on Google searching for, a therapist in their area. So, we help a lot of clients that way with their websites.
Amazing. Yeah. So grateful you're here. Thank you again for sponsoring this event to help us put it together. With that, I'm going to move over to Megan as our first author speaker. Thank you, Megan, for being here. So an opportunity to learn more about Megan's book, and let's jump in.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. It's so exciting to be able to share a little bit about my writing experience and how it worked for me. My book is called Thriving as a Therapist, and I have a couple things to share about my experience. One is it's a 210-page book with over 20 years of knowledge on how to build and scale a business as a therapist. And it's under $20 on Amazon. So you can kind of keep those numbers in mind as you're kind of thinking about, how you're going to maybe approach your pricing and your length of your book. I received a grant from Meta in 2023 for having one of the 33 highest engaging Facebook communities in all of North America. And with that grant, they invited us to consider using the funds for a project for our community. So for the Thriving Therapist Facebook community, I kept thinking to myself, what would be the best use of this money? How could I, maximize getting more information into more people's hands at a really low cost, offer? So I decided to go for it and write a book. I've always wanted to write a book. I love blogging. I love writing. And I blogged for many, many years for my own website many years ago when I had a solo private practice. And I really enjoy the writing process. But the grant certainly helped me fund the project. And with the money, I was able to hire a really amazing marketing and self-publishing coach. Tamara Manosoff is her name, Tamara Manosoff. And I also hired an editor, which was a great experience for me too. So all I had to do was write the book, and then she went through and edited it. And then I had my coach develop the marketing strategy for me, and also the cover design and the layout for KDP inside self-publishing inside Amazon for both print and Kindle options. So that was a great load off my plate. I probably could have researched that and done it myself, but to be able to hand that off to someone was very helpful. With the help of my marketing coach, I also hit #1 bestseller in 9 out of 10 categories in Amazon overnight, which was really exciting. But it was also because I had an audience at the time of almost 20,000 highly engaged therapists. So part of my advice to all of you is about thinking about your platform. So if you haven't done anything to develop a platform for who's going to buy your book, that could be something really important to start thinking about, because you may be writing a book for your caseload of clients in front of you, or you might be writing a B2B kind of book like I was, business to business. And if you're doing that, you may want to consider how you're going to attract your buyers. There's different ways of going about this. And I'm sure with all the people you have lined up today, Kara, you'll have lots of different opinions and lots of great advice on this, but that's personally how I did it. I do also want to mention a couple of the difficulties. For me, I was also very busy, full private practice, full coaching caseload, managing a huge Facebook community, and developing courses and retreats and summits for those therapists, and trying to also write this book while I manage my family and all the other things I had going on too. But I told myself I would take 10 weeks to write it. And every week I would write 2 chapters, no matter what. So when I hit Sunday, if I hadn't written 2 chapters, I got in there and closed the door, locked everything down, and just forced myself to do 2 chapters a week for 10 weeks, which was great. Because then I was able to meet my deadline and hand my stuff into my editor. The other thing I will share, if I have another minute, is it's a very, very vulnerable experience writing a book. And I was so excited to get all my information out there. But I think one of the things that makes my book so successful is not only the content, but how I share very vulnerably my own challenges and struggles, and kind of how I, built my business in a very difficult, hard way. And that was hard to share that because I was worried that people might be critical of that or I would receive some negative reviews. And so the night before my book was to launch on Amazon, you can ask my husband, I was kind of a mess. I was like, burn it all down. I don't want to do this. So it was really, really hard, really scary. But I'm glad I decided to move forward and I was able to harness the courage to get it out there because thousands of people have sent me emails and DMs and letters and all kinds of great messages saying that my book really helped them or they wish they could have found it many years ago. So I do feel really proud of being able to compile everything I know about being a thriving therapist and kind of putting it into one resource for people.
Amazing. You're so inspiring. So I'm sure people have questions and we do have time for questions because you like just jumped right in there. So does the audience have questions? I mean, I could ask you questions all day, Megan, but audience members, questions you want to ask Megan about her experience, her book, other things? Feel free to unmute, put it in the chat. I'm monitoring both for you. But yeah,
Megan,
so,
will you
ahead,
write
Joy.
another book?
I do want to write another one. And right now I'm thinking about my other expertise is in retreats. So I've done almost every single therapist podcast on how to build retreats. So you can look out there on all the different therapist podcasts, that are out there on that topic. And I have helped a lot of therapists in my own space learn how to build successful retreats, which is one of my biggest passions. I've been doing that for a long time. So I'm kind of thinking if I do another book, it would be how to build a successful sold out, retreat that's mostly for therapists, but it could also apply, I think, to a larger, broader audience of coaches or maybe even yoga instructors and things like that. So that's kind of turning in my wheels there in my mind. But I'm not 100% sure the timeline or when I would even start that. I usually wait for inspiration to strike. But now that I know a little bit more about the process, I think I can definitely do it. So the accountability of the 2 chapters a week really did help me get that job done. And I know I would love to hear how other authors did it because it is hard. When you're sitting there looking at like this daunting task of writing an entire book, it's like, where do you begin? I did break down my chapters also on a big Post-it note sheet on my wall. And so I was kind of using a big visual wall calendar to kind of help me kind of like put the Post-it notes in order and move things around in terms of what I wanted to include. And then it was easy because then I had a really well-defined outline and I could just write, the book chapter by chapter, looking at what I had already done sort of sequentially. So that was another strategy that helped me quite a bit, more of like a brain dump and just getting it all out there, putting it into the Google Doc and then going chapter by chapter.
Amazing. Did you have any rituals for your deadlines of every week where you're like, I'm writing here in this outfit or with this beverage or anything like that?
I do have some little funny things. I have like a couple little things on my desk that actually really inspire me to like, I don't know. I just have a couple little things that I like. I light a certain kind of incense. I kind of have a little thing I do with creative movement before I write. I do a little bit of like, I try to do some physical movement actually before I write, whether it's a walk around the block or I actually was part of a writer's accountability group for a while. This was done by Lisa Tenner, who is an amazing book coach. If you're looking for some help with that, Lisa Tenner. And she's out of Rhode Island. She's amazing. I met her at a conference where we were both speaking many years ago. I met her at Harvard at a writing and publishing conference I went to. And I've been in contact with her ever since. And when I started writing this book, I decided to do the accountability work group that she had. And she started every session with Qigong, like movement and energy kind of movement. And it was amazing because when I did that, I did a little meditation too. And when I did those practices, I found my writing just flowed really easily. So for me, and I apologize for the snoring dog, for me, moving and doing meditation really helped clear my mind so that I could kind of set aside all the noise that was going on and really dive into the flow of the writing. So that helped me a lot.
That's awesome.
Sorry,
Beautiful.
that's
I love people's rituals. Yeah. No, we can't hear. But yeah, I can't hear your dog, so you're
okay.
okay.
Good. It's like a little pig sleeping away in here, and I can't let her out of the room or she'll bark at me.
Fair enough. Other questions for Megan? We have time for one more question if someone has one for her.
I've got one.
Yeah.
I'm curious about your marketing person. How did they help you to get to like these high ranking.
She was
I don't know.
amazing. Tamara Monosoff is incredible. This is all she does is like marketing for self-publishing. And she helps people figure out which categories would be best for their book. So she asked me, we went through a spreadsheet of like 100 categories on Amazon. And we were trying to, and I was telling her which ones I felt were going to be applicable to the chapters I was writing and which ones were not. And when you're selecting chapters nowadays for trying to rank #1 bestseller, I think they only give you 3. But at the time that I launched my book, they gave us 10. And she was like, you'd be lucky if you get like 3 or 4 of these to hit #1 bestseller. But that day when we launched, she kept messaging me. We were just like both on fire. And I was like, oh my God, another one. And she was like, you have 9 out of 10, which is really exciting. But it's because she actually researched those categories very well. For example, you can't just say self-help books, because if you do that, then you won't rank #1 usually on your launch day, because you're competing with like 50,000 other, categories in the self-help category. So you do have to drill down a little bit and get very specific, but that also helps people find your book. So that was one of the ways that she helped me. And then we had a big launch party that we hosted, which we did a ton of marketing leading up to it. Julie Harris had an amazing, even more amazing launch strategy than I did. I was part of her sponsorship team of like sort of, endorsing her book and, sharing it in my audience too. But the way that she did it, I mean, I hope you share some of that, Julie, because it was incredible. And I was learning from what you were doing at the time you were launching yours. But yeah, she helped me with the launch party, and that was great. But having a platform certainly really increased my rankings, and was, part of that strategy was, making sure that I had a strong platform in front of me.
Awesome. Yeah, and our second sponsor, Wolf Design and Publishing, also does keywords. So that's how I got keywords as a self-published author as well. So we have resources for Christy and anyone else who's asking about how to rank. So it's really fun to see that bestseller status, and 9 out of 10 is amazing. So we can definitely highlight some of that with our sponsor here at the end of today's event as well. Thank you, Megan. Mary, you are the winner of Megan's book. So I'll make sure to connect Mary to Megan today. Thank you so much. My second speaker is not yet in the room. So Julie, you are here. Are you willing to go next? Because you're here.
Let's do it. Absolutely.
Thank you. Awesome. Go ahead.
Hello. So I wrote the book that you see behind me, Profit First for Therapists. So it is a book based on the very popular cash flow management system, Profit First, that originally, the original Profit First book was written by Mike Michalowicz. There are now, I think, 16 spin-offs of this book, just in part because the system works incredibly well. But the original book is a very generalist book. And consistently, I know our clients, I'm an accountant at heart. My primary, day job is I am the CEO of an accounting firm that specializes in working with therapists in private practice. And so our clients were coming to us saying, I really want to implement Profit First, but I read the book and I'm not quite sure what to do next, right? That just kept coming up again and again and again. Like, I get the concept and I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, I want in, but the logistics of actually implementing this in my private practice are not quite making sense. And so that's where this whole idea started from. I knew that writing a book would be a lot of work, so I really thought about it before I jumped in. I had multiple conversations with Mike Michalowicz before I committed to this project. Like, can I not? How's that going to work? So although the system is the same, right? Profit First is the same ultimately across all the different books. I wrote every single word of this book, and I wanted it to actually be able to transform people's lives. I didn't want it to just be a copycat or just to like, oh yeah, this is a fill in the blank. Absolutely not. Every single word is just from me. So it was not going to be a business card book for me. I worked with writing coach AJ Harper, who is Mike's co-author for all of his books. They now have a podcast together called Don't Write That Book, which I'm loving. I love that book, where they actually are encouraging people to write a book, but with the podcast, Don't Write That Book. Like, there's certain books that don't need to be written. So anyway, great podcast to check out. But AJ has this amazing 12-week workshop that guides aspiring writers on how to write a transformational nonfiction book. So it's not just about like, oh, I've got this idea, let me think of a title. Like, she has a very clear system to kind of get all the good stuff out of you, build your outline. And one of her mottos is reader first. So we're always going back to like, what does the reader need? Is this in service of me or my ego, or is this actually in service of the reader? And is this going to help them on their transformational journey? So kind of like Megan, that was a significant investment, but I'm really, really glad I did it, just because the framework, the habits, and the guidance I needed were, were in this program. I think I could have written the book without that. I think it's a 10x better book because I did go through it. And based on the feedback that we've been getting, the book launched in May. Based on the feedback that we've been getting since then, I think readers would agree that it really is helpful. We get into the nitty gritty of everything. So for me, writing this book was about a 2-year commitment. I did take some little breaks here and there, but as far as like getting from just ideation all the way to publishing was a 2-year process. I do want to mention, like, one of the things that I thought I wanted to do is, because I'm a mom, I snuck in what I call some veggies for readers. So I wanted this book to be about profit first, but just like when my kids were little, I would sneak in veggies into their meal. I knew that therapists, in order to manage their money better, they needed to understand some basics of just accounting, bookkeeping, how the tax code works, just some basic, building blocks. So I snuck those in as well. So yes, my book is about profit first, but there also are chapters on things like paying down debt, because guess what? A lot of therapists have student loan debt. There's a chapter on paying your team members, because in a practice, if you have team members, that's usually going to be the single largest expense you have. There's another chapter on scaling, because that's something that can be exciting, but also really, really challenging for someone who doesn't necessarily have a business background. So I included all kinds of things that are financially related, but not necessarily like a direct profit first through line. To Megan's point, I had a really fun launch party. One of the really surprising things for me, Kara, and now that you've launched 8 books, like I am in awe, because launching one was hard enough. I was really surprised. I'm glad I learned this in AJ's workshop. I did not realize how much time I would need to market the book before launch. I just thought, like, oh, once I'm done writing, the hard part is done, and then the book will just sell itself. I was completely wrong. And I had about 5 months when it was all said and done. I was aiming for 6, ended up with 5, to just start getting the word out. So pre-sales, getting on a lot of different podcasts, writing guest blogs, all the different things to be able to get the word out. Because honestly, before that point, I did not have the mental space to be doing that in addition to writing. So for me, I needed to be able to get this to the finish line, turn things over to the proofreader, the typeset, all of the different things, and like then focus on marketing. So that was something that came as a really, really big surprise for me. So on the day of the launch party, we had a live event. My team and I internally practiced it very often. We had, kind of like Kara does say, 15-minute slots with a different guest every 15 minutes, which was really, really, really hard to keep on track. And then really just a short little break with some tidbits in between, like behind the scenes stuff. So I had Mike Michalowicz on the live stream. We had AJ Harper, my book coach, who was there. A lot of people who shared their stories in the book attended to, just share about how the book had affected, or how, not the book, but how Profit First had changed their life and changed their business. So it was not at all a sales event. It was just like a real celebration with music and balloons and like just all kinds of fun stuff. So I really, really enjoyed putting that together. I did have also a lot of help behind the scenes. I'm keeping an eye on the time, Kara. One of my team members kind of shifted half of her focus to being my book launch manager. That is not her background at all. We worked with a consultant and followed a plan to get the word out about the book. And oh my gosh, was that ever helpful? There are so many little things to do to have someone from my team who knows me so well, who's just a rah-rah cheerleader of the book, be able to keep us on track for all the things that were that needed to get done. That was incredibly helpful. The manpower alone of getting a book to launch was and still is a little bit shocking to me. I'm really glad I did it, and I'm still on the fence as far as if I have another one in me. I have not started writing again. So I want to make sure I share. One of the tips that I learned early on is to make writing a habit. So I did not wait. I could not wait to let inspiration hit me in the face. That was just not going to be an option. I have a business. I have 3 children, 3 dogs. Like, it just was not going to happen. So my writing time was from 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. every day. So I would get up before my family. I would get some writing done before having to get everyone off to school. And I didn't open my email. I didn't look at Facebook. I didn't do anything else. I just sat down and I wrote. So I made writing a habit so that whether I felt like it or not, I knew I was going to sit down. I was going to write something. It could be 10 words. It could be 100 words. It could be 300 words, depending on the day. But I was going to get something written. And so just keep making that slow and steady progress every single day is what eventually got me to the finish line. That's probably why it took 2 years in the end.
I love hearing people's stories. So thank you, Julie, for that. Because I think people are like, oh, what is the average time frame of writing a book? And it's like, it's so different based on what you're writing about, what
Yeah.
your life is like.
I don't think there is a right answer, because I've heard, I know Casey Compton wrote her book in 5 weeks, her first book, and like that's unusual, but most people are
Mhm.
going to need more time than that. And if you do, I think that's completely fine. Eventually you'll get there. I think that just making progress is such a game changer when it comes to the mental load of writing the book, of like, okay, we're gonna get there. We're a little bit at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. Questions for Julie and her experience with Profit First for therapists. Any questions from our audience today? Now it's a lot to take in. Julie, do you feel like this has changed things in your professional life to have a book? I know you kind of alluded to like the process itself was a learning curve, but anything you want to share about how
Yes.
life looks now that you're a published author?
I think, yes, it has changed things, is the short answer. My goal with writing the book was to get this information to as many people as possible for a low price point. Because even though I have an accounting firm, even if I scale it to the largest accounting firm in the country, like I would still not be able to work with every therapist out there. And for some, the price point is also going to be cost prohibitive. And so I wanted to get information out there because I truly believe that every practice deserves to be profitable. And this is one of the ways that I can serve that message in a way that's accessible. It is, the book is available on Amazon, Audible, Kindle, usually around, like, depending on the day, between $20 and $24 typically, depending on Amazon's funky algorithm. And so you can't, I mean, that's a lot of value in just a small, ultimately small for business price point. And so on the back end, though, that has affected the business as well. Obviously, getting the message out there, I think it's attracting even more people to Profit First. And then, of course, like, if you're going to work with someone, you might as well work with the people who wrote the book. And so that is helpful, on the back end of the business. So for anyone who's writing to their ideal client, it certainly does help. Typically, it's kind of a wave, and it does take some time, but it absolutely will help. If you write a book that truly helps people, that will come back to you tenfold, is kind of how I see it.
Mhm. Yeah. So like for anyone who's like on the fence, I think the message is do it anyway, write the book.
Yeah. Write the book, get your message out there. And yeah. What do you think, Kara? Like, if a book helps people, I think it
Mhm.
will just bring that positive energy back to you at some point.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I think obviously the hope is that there's enjoyment for the writer to go through this process, especially when you say 2 years, or for some people like 10 years might be normal based on life happening. So if it's not enjoyable for them, I think that's a factor that we should name. But I think there's this like return of credibility and presence and the messages that we all get of like, this really helped, or, I didn't know this book existed. I'm so glad. Excuse me. I think that's just so powerful. to get those messages for years later of like, it really did help.
Yeah. And I would not have considered myself a writer before starting this process. I think that can be important to say, like, I'm an accountant, I'm a numbers person. That felt very like fluffy to me. I'm like, oh, how do I write this in a way that's fun and engaging and storytelling? But I think it can be a learned skill. And I will be the first to admit every day was not a, rainbows and unicorns. That is not at all the case, right? Especially getting up, getting to my desk at 6 a.m. That usually means like a 5:30 wake up call. But most days were good. And like, I think that's ultimately what counts in making it a habit. It's really exciting to then have those aha moment days like, yes, this is resonating, this is really good. When you come back to it a couple of days or a couple of weeks later, like, yes, this is going to really help. That I think there's something really special about that.
Yeah, and I think as someone who's read most of your book, I'm still working on the last part of it, if I'm being honest, on this recording. But what I loved was the stories that you put throughout to be like, here's how to illustrate a concept, here's somebody you worked with. And I just really enjoy story when I'm a reader. So I just wanted to reflect that back for anyone in the call who's thinking about writing a book. My call to action for you is like, include story, infuse story throughout if you can, because I think that just adds more heart to the topics that we all have and can speak to. So I loved that about your book, Julie.
Oh, thank you. I interviewed a lot of practice owners for the book. And sometimes we would pluck a story from our clients, right? And know like, oh, I'm looking for a story around this. Who's got something? And we would pluck the story and talk to the practice owner, of course. And sometimes these stories just came out in conversation. It's just a fun skill to learn, to like find the story in the numbers. Which
Absolutely.
learn skill for me.
Well, thank you, Julie, for being here. Christy, you are our winner of Julie's book, so I'll make sure to connect you both, Christy Sears Thompson and Julie. Thank you so much.
Yay.
Our next speaker is on a little bit early, so if Nicole is ready, I'm going to invite her to say hi because she just popped on, and we'll hear from her. Thank you, Julie. Nicole?
Hey, I'm glad I jumped on just to see who was here and to kind of see if maybe I could catch the person before me because it's been such a busy day. So
Yeah, I think that's the theme of the day because people are kind of coming and going as we're recording today. So yeah, happy you're here. Would love you to introduce yourself and talk about your author journey if you're open to it.
yeah, of course. So my name is Nicole Lewis Kieber, and I have a master's degree in social work. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. But currently I'm called the business therapist because I left direct practice after about 18 years. Well, I mean, not just direct practice, you name it. And if there's a clinical setting for mental health or anything, I was there. Long career. And as you can imagine, kind of crispy around the 18th year, and ended up leaving to start my own business as a money mindset coach for small business owners and entrepreneurs. And what I learned along the way is that you don't leave your therapy hat when you start a business as a coach, and that everything is everything and everything's all connected, and that you'll bring all of your skill sets and all of your challenges to your new business. And so that's kind of, what my book is about is that after being a therapist for 18 years and started doing money mindset coaching with these business owners, what I was recognizing is that they had mindset challenges, but they really weren't mindset in total. They were actually more trauma responses that were playing out in their money, or adaptations that were playing out in desires to be an entrepreneur business owner. And so I got really curious about, okay, so if trauma can be connected to your money, and everything we've experienced stays with us and brings goes with us into our business, what can we do about that? And the story of my journey is in this book as well as other clients. It's called How to Live Your Business. But the first story in the book is mine, and I was about a year and a half into my own business. And I had not been a business owner before. I did have a small private practice, but that's a little different in that I was credentialed, so I was getting referrals. I wasn't really doing marketing, and there really wasn't the same type of relationship. And I was about 1.5 to 2 years into my own business, and I was feeling like a failure. Every morning I was feeling like a failure, even though the numbers weren't lining up. There was no real reason for me to feel that way. I was feeling like this invisible they, whoever they are, was upset and unhappy with me, no matter what I did. And I was really thinking about just closing the business, because even though it was doing well, I was contributing to my family, and there was no evidence to the contrary. I was holding a heaviness around it. And I recognized after reading some another author, Big Magic, Liz Gilbert, I was reading her book, and there was a chapter in there about how we can be in relationship with things, your work, a project, a tree, nature, whatever. And it hit me like a ton of bricks that I really loved my business, but I didn't feel like my business loved me back. And that the relationship that I had built with my business was one that was very toxic and was actually mimicking the relationship I had with my mother, who was a very difficult and challenging relationship. And so this book really talks about how I began to understand that when you start a business, you enter into a relationship with it. It's not you, it's something outside of you. And all the experiences that you have, all the dynamics and relationships, that they can be brought into that business. And so this whole book is about how to recognize the relationship that you have with your business now. Is it supportive, or is it demanding and demeaning? And how you can begin to change that. And I talk about how I changed it and how I've worked with clients to change their relationship with their business as well. And you were talking earlier about story. Stories are great, and there's a lot of case study type stories in this book where I talk about how each one of these clients had realized what relationship they had created with their business. One person, their business was their controlling and very critical father, right? So nothing they could do was good enough for their business ever. So yeah, that's kind of the journey from therapy to business ownership to writing this book about how I fell flat on my face emotionally in my own business and how I started to pull myself out of it.
That's beautiful. And we were hearing from other speakers today about the vulnerability of telling your own story. How did you know you were ready to tell that story to people?
Oh gosh. I think I've always been a kind of a live out loud person. I've always been someone who, if I learned something, I wanted to teach it. And I grew up with a learning difference. And so I've always been someone who processes what works for me, because I'm always on the margin trying to figure stuff out. And I think it was more comfortable for me to do that. And I was actually teaching people how to do this before I wrote the book. And was one of the, forerunners and thought leaders on this idea of the entrepreneurship and trauma and entrepreneurship connection, how childhood trauma can be the motivator to start a business. It can influence the relationship you have with your business, and how trauma can embed itself in your business. And so a lot of the work I do is helping people understand how trauma and entrepreneurship are connected and how they can begin to unthread that, but not lose the skills that they learned from those experiences. But the thing is that before I mentioned learning difference, I am not a writer. So it is my least favorite thing to do. It is my least favorite way to represent myself. I process information slower. It's just not my jam whatsoever. And I really tried not to write this book. I was like, I'm fine working with people. I created a Love Your Business School. It's all these things where I was teaching people all these skills and the techniques and tools that I had learned. But this book was like, you have got to write this book. It would not let me go. So it was probably 3 years or more after I started using these frameworks and came up, with this concept, where I actually started to write the book. And the way that I had to write this book was, I wrote down an outline for myself, and I left it. And then I came back and I wrote down the outline again, and I left it. And then I started interviewing people because, why not avoid writing? So I just started interviewing people. and came back to it again and wrote a first draft. And it was the hardest thing to get that first draft done. And I ended up taking that first draft and hiring she was a ghost editor, not a ghost writer, but a ghost editor. And she went through it and she goes, "This is amazing. I've never heard of this before. This is, this is game-changing information. And I need it to be more than 5 pages long." So she literally interviewed me and help me pull out the stories because I'm very efficient. If I have to go from here to typing, you have lost 80% of the gold by that point. And so I had to really just own how I process information, recognize that, my learning differences and the dyslexic traits were going to make it really difficult for me to get on paper what I wanted to get there. And just had to name it, own it, and allow for the support to get the story in its fullness out onto the pages by asking for support. And so that's really how my journey, that's how my journey evolved. And like I said, the book was like not going to let me not write it. So it just wanted to be written. So we did it.
I love that. And such a beautiful story of like you had found the right person to capture what you had in your head and bring it onto paper. I feel like you named that's a feat in itself just to make it show up on paper to write the book.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And the second question always is when you're going to write another book. And I'm like, ah,
All
when
of the
it won't
authors have
leave
asked
me
that,
alone, when it won't leave me alone enough that I just cave and do the next one.
that you can't ignore it any longer. Yep, I think we're hearing that from all the authors today. Like, yep, there's another book in all of their minds, and it's just about win. Mhm.
Yeah. And
Our audience, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Sorry, Nicole.
No, you go.
I was just to say, audience members, do you have questions for Nicole on her story, the book? I try to put all the links of the books in the chat for all of you. Questions for Nicole? I could like sit in silence forever, huh?
Yeah. It's not uncommon when I first started talking about this, I had to get really used to the silence because often it's very normal that most people haven't really thought about the fact that their childhood trauma could be showing up in their business or that their business could be a mechanism for self-abuse. Because really, honestly, what I was doing is I was using my business as a way to be mean to myself. I had turned it into a mean boss. I was replicating those really mean patterns and was using my business as a tool for it, So it's not uncommon for it to be a little startling of a topic initially. So when I gave keynotes on this, I had to just stop, let the audience be, and recognize that all the emails were going to come afterwards with all the questions, which is what happens, and that's totally fine. Which again, right, why you write the book. Who was my ghost editor? I can't remember her name specifically at the moment, but I worked with the Brooklyn book doctor, Joelle Hahn, and she connected me with the ghost editor whose name escapes me at the moment, but that is who I worked with.
Yeah, I
Support's so
think just knowing that
important.
that's a person is cool. Like I've never heard of a ghost editor before.
Yeah, support is really important because, I didn't go to school to be a writer. I went to school to be a therapist. And so you're getting the appropriate, support around writing the book, designing the book. It's, allow yourself to have it. And my gosh, when I think about therapists in general, just the breadth of knowledge, experience, and just the thumb on humanity, I know you have something you want to tell people. I know you have something you want to teach them that you want to share. And so I know that we walk that fine line of confidentiality. What can we share? What can't we? In every story in my book, obviously, they gave me permission to share. But I just want to encourage anyone who thinks that they might have a book in them or something they want to share to really strongly consider it because it opens up a lot of doors for you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nicole. We have time for
Welcome.
one more question. Does anyone have one as you're taking us all in? Nicole said it beautifully. Like you might need a minute to see the connection here between childhood stuff. As a former workaholic, I hear this loud and clear from you, Nicole.
Yeah, and
Like, oh,
it's not a long book, and there's exercises in every chapter too. So it's a working book. What kind of money are authors spending to get their books written, published, and marketed? So for me, all total, with this extra support, which sometimes when you you have differences or challenges. Sometimes there's a tax on that, and I recognize that I needed to pay more in order to get the support I needed. And I was privileged to be able to do so. My business paid for it. And so I'm thinking, all told, I was about $3,600 in for the whole process, including designing it, and I self-published on Amazon. It made it back. I have made that money back from sales. I've also made that money plus with speaking opportunities, just the legitimacy, I guess, having a book can bring. It's a nice calling card for yourself. So it has paid for itself. It's taken 3 years, but it has paid for itself.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a valid question for all of us as we're looking at self-publish versus a publisher. There's so many dynamics there. But yeah, I agree. It's like a lead magnet to other opportunities for speaking, keynotes, courses, things that you do now. Amazing.
Yeah. I
Thank
agree.
you, Nicole.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. Kristen H., you are the winner of Nicole's book. So make sure you jump into the chat and private message me your email so I can get you connected to Nicole for her book. Yay.
Yay, that's
Um,
exciting. I'm gonna have to jump now because I have a Dare to Lead training to jump into.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah,
Thank you, Nicole, for being here. Appreciate
I'll see
you.
you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take care, everyone.
Everyone's got so much going on today. Christy, I know we're 10 minutes early from your time, but my other person, I'm messaging all these authors behind the scenes. So like, where are y'all? But if you're willing to chat, I'm willing to have you go next if you're ready for it, Christy.
Sure. I can have 20 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'll be completely honest here. I'm feeling like a little bit of an imposter in a room of such amazing greatness and people who like have marketing strategy. That's why I even asked the question to Julie because I was like, or not to Julie, to Megan, because I was like, I like to write, I can't get it out of my head fast enough. I've always been a writer. I have my undergrad as an English degree, so I even from a very young age, I just have loved to write. I used to write poetry as a kid, and just writing is a part of who I am. So I knew always I wanted to do something with writing. And kind of fell into being a therapist. So I guess that's part of my little bit of my story. At this point in my life, I have 2 books published, both self-published. One that has been written but not yet published because it is a children's book, and I am kind of sort of looking for an illustrator. And then I have other books, I suppose, that have been also written. And I also just put like a poll out there for my friends and colleagues on Facebook. I was like, hey, these have been a thing already, but they're in my online course that I'm sunsetting. So should I just publish them? And everybody's like, duh, yes, do that. So, of course, they're like, yes, if you've created it, put it out into the world in different formats. And I think that's kind of the message that everybody is hammering home today is like, if you have an idea, if you have a thing, just put it out there. You know, um, it's scary and it's vulnerable, and you like put your heart and soul into something. You put a lot of hours of work that even maybe taking time away from your family or your business. But once you get it out there, it's there and it's yours and you can claim that. And there's nothing I don't think that anybody should feel like should stop them from doing that. Um, if you have the means and the priority in place to be able to do that. So I guess just quickly, I wanted to show you, I have my 2 books. I brought, so this is my very first book. This is not a therapy book, by the way. It is a children's book, and it is called The Princess Who Loved Trucks. It's a coloring book, and I brought it out this week because I was like, oh, I need to like bring this so I can show it like a hard copy to this book fair. And my daughter, who is 4, was like, what's that? And I'm like, oh, that's my book. And she's like, I can color in it. And I was like, yes, you can, because it's also a coloring book. So I will show you. She literally has like spent like 5 hours on this book this week, just like coloring things because she's so excited. She's like, oh my gosh, it's your book, Mom. So I mean, that is kind of sweet in itself of just being like, this is something that I made really it was for my kids. I made it during my son's nap time when he was little, and he is now 9.5. So that was my process was I'm stuck in the house. I'm not doing anything. I don't want to be just messing around on Facebook, like wasting my time. I'm feeling creative. I want to do something. And this idea of like, yes, you can be a girl and like boy things, and you can be a boy and like girl things. And it came out of an idea that I was talking with another mom friend of mine, where she was starting to potty train her child and saying, like, he really wants to wear like Frozen underwear, like the movie, right? But they don't have any boy Frozen underwear. So I just bought him the girls. And like, who cares? It doesn't matter. Um, so that's honestly, that's where the idea for this book came from, was like, it's okay for you to be who you are. It's okay for you to like what you like. It doesn't really matter. You're still loved as you are. So I guess, I don't know, I guess there's a therapy message in there somewhere. But more it's from a child's perspective. And it's fun because it's a coloring book. And yes, I also did the illustrations. And you're gonna laugh at me because I am not a graphic designer. Um, I made all the illustrations on Microsoft Paint. And like pixel by pixel. Yeah, it was probably the worst way to do it, other than maybe like hand drawing something. But so that's my children's book that I have so far. The second book, it feels more like a little like legitimate book. Not that that one's not, but you know, we're with great therapists here. Um, Again, I'm owning my imposter syndrome here. So my second one is like a for real book. It's got like actual like pages that are, it's a longer book, right? And it's the Partnerhood, which is a program that I had created because I typically work and focus my specialty in my private practice and working with families who are going to be having children or who already have young children. So this particular book, I wanted to focus on helping couples prepare for that really huge transition into parenthood of like everything is going to change. And we're going to have this huge tsunami of like, okay, we have a baby, and now what? What happens to our relationship? We don't want that to break us apart, because so often what I have been seeing in the 13 years of my private practice at this point is that, you know, you have a really strong couple relationship and then you have a baby and it goes bloop and then falls apart, focuses on the child, and then that disconnection becomes stronger and stronger the more you don't nurture that relationship. So I wanted to create a program that was going to help people prepare more for that parenthood tidal wave of the relationship. And so I've done that through um, making 5, I guess, areas of focus. So talking about communication, conflict management, connection, self-care, and relationship care. And made that into both a book, an online course. I'm actually sunsetting the online course because it fell flat. Maybe I don't have the marketing behind it. Maybe I'll revisit it at some point, but I'm actually turning everything into an app instead because I think that's actually more where my people are, who I'm looking for this for. So that will be coming by the end of March.
Congrats, Christy. Lots of changes, and obviously like the vulnerability to tell us like, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, here's what I'm still working on.
Oh,
I think that
so
is
much
definitely
has
part of the
not worked.
process. Yeah. Marketing. I'm hearing marketing is kind of key for all of us. So, like, how do we get the right
Yes.
tools for marketing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Audience, anyone have questions for Christy on her 2 books, the things she's working on now? Illustrations. When you said that, I was like, yep, I definitely have that too. Where it's like illustrations make or break children's books for anything going forward for all of us, if that's a
Yeah.
goal.
And I will say for the first one, because I did my own illustrations and it was just for fun. Like, I am not an artist. I am not a graphic designer. I obviously use Microsoft Paint, which is the worst idea ever to like try and illustrate something. But that's what I had at my disposal, and that was fun for me. Like it wasn't torture. It was fun. For this next book that I've written that I want illustrations for, I don't feel like I have the time or the bandwidth to do the illustrations for it. And I'm certainly not going to be using Microsoft Paint again.
I was very impressed when you said that, and a little like, oh my God. Like, that's a lot
It's a little
right there.
crazy. It's a little crazy.
Other questions for Christy as we have just like maybe a minute left for her to share. Do we get to ask you what your next book's about, or is that a secret?
Oh, it's no secret. It's another kid's book, and it has, again, like nothing to do with therapy, because it's just I want to write books and have fun things and have a variety of stuff that I do. It's called There's Dog Hair in My Underwear.
Well, I'm already intrigued, and I have a kid, so I'm like, sign me up when it's out. Dog hair in my underwear. Got it. I love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
so fun. Thank you so much for being here, Christy. My
Yeah,
little
thank you
random
for
number
having me.
generator. Yeah, of course. Our winner of one of Christy's books, you guys can decide that by email back and forth, is, I don't know if I'm going to say your name right, Edla? I'm not saying that right, but either way, congrats. You are the winner of Christy's book.
Yes, that's right, Edla. Yeah,
Edla, thank you. Congratulations.
thanks.
Thank you again, Christy.
Christy, can I ask you a quick question? Did you say you turned your course into a book?
Yes, I did. So I had it as a course first, is through Thinkific, and had written like all the modules and everything. And I was like, why not just put this on Amazon too?
That's what I needed to hear. Thanks.
It's also
That
it's also
resonates.
on Kindle as well. So like it's on Amazon and it's on Kindle. So it's more accessible and open. And that, again, like that's why I wanted to make the app as well, because I just want accessibility.
And just one more thing, how long is it?
The
How
book?
many yeah, how long I mean,
Good
I hear
question.
all kinds of things about, sorry, y'all, I literally just got out of yoga and I'm definitely not coming on camera. So I was doing yoga while I was listening. I'm just curious about,
It's about 80 pages.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
That was about 80 pages.
Yeah, so I hear different people talk about, tiny books or long books, and I'm just curious. There's a lot of authors on here now, so I would love to hear what people have to say about that. So anyway.
Well, this one in particular, sorry, if I have like one more minute.
Mhm.
This one in particular, it's with a workbook, because I made it out of the material and the content for the course. There's a lot of like, I don't know if I can really like show it here. So there is some like content writing stuff, but there's also like worksheets, and there's places for like notes. So let me see here if I can like even get to one. So like here's like a handout, nurturing emotional connection, different things you can do for that. Here's here's the Gottman one for people who do Gottman work. It's the 6 magic hours. So how can you do that more effectively? So like there's handouts and worksheets and things in this as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so to that question, I can also speak to Amazon to self-publish requires 24 minimum pages. So even when you're thinking of like a children's book, 24, like each side is a page, right? So like 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So like you'd have to like format that if you're gonna do a self-published option. If you're gonna work with a publisher, they might say something like, I want 40,000 words, which is what my publisher kept asking for. And I, as this only self-published author up until that moment, didn't know what that actually looked like, to the question that's been asked of like, well, how many pages is 40,000 words? And it averages about 130 to 150 pages for a book. So like still pretty accessible, not at all like a hefty, like textbook kind of feel, but a lot of content there. So as people are listening or watching this back, I think that's something to chew on too, of like, does it feel accessible to do 40,000 words? Is it more about, I need a minimum of 24 pages to put something up that I find valuable? Hopefully that's helpful to everyone who's listening, and for Christy to share her experience both as children's book author and adult workbook. I guess that would be the best way to put it, like partnership author as well. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you.
All right. Other questions, as we're kind of like in between speakers, we can also start with another person a little bit early, because they are all, more of them have jumped on, which is awesome. Any questions before we get to our next person? Just checking in. All right. All right. So Jenny, are you here? I think I saw you pop in here somewhere. You're
I
willing to
sure
start a little early.
am.
Hi, Jenny.
Yeah, that's perfect. Hi, it's so good to see you and to see everyone.
Yeah, so we're some people pop
Thank
in
you.
and out. But yeah, would love
Yeah,
to introduce you. This is Dr. Jenny Hughes. She is another author on our list. Happy to have you share.
yeah. So, the book that I'm going to be talking about is it's called Triggers to Glimmers: A Vicarious Resilience Workbook and Journal. And I actually have another published book. I'm happy to talk about that process as well. But my Vicarious Resilience Workbook, I wanted to talk about that one because it too was an opportunity for me to see what it was like to self-publish via Amazon, and to go through that process. And for me, what I didn't even actually intend to have it turn into what it was, but I'm one of those people that I'll start working on something and then it starts like building and building, and all of a sudden it's this whole new project. And so I had actually, there is a digital creator out there. Her name is Julie Hall. Are you familiar with her, Kara? She's out of the UK. She does a lot of Amazon Kindle Direct Print stuff, and she had released a course about how to create custom branded notebooks. And I run a membership for trauma therapists. And so my initial thought was like, cool, I'm going to make these cool branded notebooks for my members. And I started working on it. And then all of a sudden I had created a workbook. And that was then my opportunity to kind of experiment and to jump into this whole world of self-publishing, which was really, really cool and exciting. And so I was able to, and I'm happy to show you on Canva some of the templates that I got. I was able to have a template. It's a 100-page journal template, basically. And so there's the template that allowed me to be able to have all of the sizing and all of the other dimensions that I needed, and also a cover template, which was really helpful that I could then customize for myself. And it took a lot of that guesswork out of it. So I was able to go from just starting to make a notebook to then all of a sudden having a combination workbook journal ready to publish and available on Amazon. And so it really was a project that developed organically through the process. And it was something that I was really passionate about, which I think was important because it was easy for me to put the content in there. Vicarious resilience is something that I teach about all the time, both to the trauma therapists in my membership and more widely, because I think as therapists, it's something that we need to know more about. It's a really powerful way that we can refill our cup without adding more stuff to our plate. And so, since it's something that I teach about and talk about and I live every day, making the content in the workbook and journal was really quite easy. And similar to what Christy was sharing, so my book, there are workbook pages, but there are also a lot of blank journaling pages. And so my book on Amazon Direct Print is considered a medium content book. And so that they have different, Kara, you'll have to talk more about how this works, I'm sure, but they have different requirements and publishing kind of requirements for like medium versus high content books. So that was a little bit of like a trial and error process, because I actually thought at first it would be a high content book, and then they kicked it back and I made that change. But it ended up being kind of easier for my first one, where I was just sort of like going into this Amazon, KDP world by myself and exploring it, to be able to have it be a medium content book. There are fewer restrictions or like requirements. And then I was able to get it on Amazon and get it out to people. And like Christy was talking about too, having that accessibility, it's easy for me to buy it and send it to someone. It's also really easy and accessible for other folks to buy it. I've had a number of people buy them for all the therapists in their group practice, things like that. So it has become another form of income for me that I really wasn't necessarily anticipating, but has really been something to help me connect with even more people, to help even more people, and to get the word out there about things like vicarious resilience.
Amazing. I feel like what you're speaking to is like really having a clear audience, which is something all authors should have, right? Like what else could you say about that, of like market to a clear audience?
Yeah, definitely. And, sometimes like vicarious resilience, just like vicarious trauma, is something that is relevant for anyone in a helping and healing profession. And sometimes I was actually making some updates to it recently, and I almost wanted to change the title, which you're not allowed to do unless you make a new edition or book. But there can be that pull of like, but I want this for everyone. And it still is and can be for everyone. But I still am very focused on that audience of trauma therapists, because that's where my passion is, that's where my business is. And I also think I'm not quite ready to expand wider in my business yet, and that's okay. And so focusing in on that means I know exactly who I'm talking to. And when I'm writing the book description for Amazon, when I am talking about it in my email or on my social, I know exactly who I'm talking to, and it makes that so much easier to get the word out and to market the book as well.
Amazing. What questions do our participants who are on the call right now have for Jenny? Questions about her process? Most people have been asking how long it took you to like start to finish. Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah. So, the initial pass where all of a sudden I realized I was making a workbook happened actually just in a few hours one night, but that was kind of to get like, I just started making some pages, and then it all started to, I could see it in my mind. And so that first initial pass of like figuring out the Canva piece and all like the formatting, and then thinking about what the different kinds of worksheets and content I wanted in there, that was probably about 3 hours. And then it was something that I was able to chunk over time. So I could come back to it and work on it, a half hour here, a half hour there, which is often how I have to do things because I have multiple businesses and kids and all of that. All in all, oh my goodness, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think from start to finish, I couldn't tell you an exact number of hours, but from start to finish, it was probably about a month. It really wasn't that long, because it was this medium content book, and I was using content that I had already created or was very familiar with, and I wasn't writing a full-on book. And then some of the back and forth with Amazon, I didn't really understand how important the dimensions were, and so I had submitted it, and then there were things outside of it, and they kicked it back. So that was another kind of couple weeks. But it didn't take too long to really get it done. And I probably could have done it quicker if I didn't have a million other things to do.
No, that's impressive. I agree. I think workbooks or like children's books, they have a different timeline than like a hefty, self-help book, as another example.
Right.
So,
Well,
cool
and so I can share a little bit of the other side. So during COVID, one of my random COVID projects was I was approached by a publisher who and they asked me to write, it's called the PTSD Recovery Workbook. And it was a very different way to publish, where they approached me and they had already basically written the outline of the book. And I then used my expertise to fill in all the content. So that was a lot more writing. And it was on a pretty quick timeline, though. I think it was like 3 months and I wrote the whole thing. And so that was much more of a traditional process. But like you were saying, Kara, there were very specific like word limits for each section. And basically it was kind of like paint by numbers with my brain, because they had already kind of outlined all the chapters and even like the subsections of the headings. And then I was able to write all of the content. And so it was a very, I think, atypical publishing process. But it was also a really good learning experience of then having more of like a written book that is available out there as well.
how has this contributed to like other opportunities for you? I know that's been a big piece of the author sharing so far, of like keynotes, speaking, other gigs. I mean, you obviously have lots of jobs. You've already alluded to that, but just curious.
So right now, especially with the workbook, I view it really as a source of nurturing people who are in my audience and in my world. It's a way that I really want to be able to give back and to share. I also have had opportunities like this. I'm going to be doing, Guy McPherson of the Trauma Therapist podcast is kind of he's doing like a virtual bookshelf series. And so I will be doing that interview. So that'll be really helpful, because that's exactly who I want to be talking to. But then ultimately I see it as something that I'm able to really kind of provide as a nurture for people who are in my world, and to share with them as a gift.
Amazing. Other questions for Jenny? I could ask questions all day to all authors, but like anyone else have a question? Is there a future book? Another book coming?
Yeah, well, yes. That will probably be a little bit later down the road. But I definitely want to do more of a traditional book about my work in teaching about vicarious trauma and vicarious resilience, and how I often talk about there's two sides of the same coin and how they go together. So that I think will be my next book once I get to that point.
Awesome. Other
And
questions?
it feels really empowering to know that I can do that on my own, you know, through something like Amazon, and that I know how to do my own marketing too. And so I'm able to get that out there and to be able to promote it and make sure it gets in the hands of the right people.
Yeah. Do you want to speak a little bit to the marketing? I know that's been a big topic today with some people have like professional teams. Other people it sounds like you are kind of did it on your own or built through your can't think of the word right now, but like your community that you've already built. There we go. Long day already, everyone. Sorry. You want to speak to your strategies of what people might want to consider?
Yeah, so I mean, there is so much power in having a connected and an engaged email list. And so that is the primary way that I market and am able to sell my offers, including my book. And then also through social media and my membership, of course. So my membership is more, I actually give them a copy of the workbook as part of their membership, and then they end up kind of sharing it or word of mouth. So it's a nice organic way to get the word out there. But through email marketing and social media kind of presence and awareness, that's my primary ways of marketing, and it has been really successful so far. But it's something that, you know, you have to really keep at and be as consistent as possible.
That makes sense, especially because marketing feels so daunting to a lot of us. So if you already have this presence or routine, a structure,
Right.
that probably makes it more tolerable.
Yeah, for sure.
Other questions for Jenny? I'll take up all the space, but let me check the chat too and make sure I'm not missing anything here.
Yeah, Christy, I think.
Would you be willing to share your marketing team people, if you have any?
Well, it has been me, myself, and I until just recently. I just started working with a VA, and we're going and I'm doing my first review of their work. I'm happy to share. I will put their website here to share with you. Let's see. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat. And they're great. Excuse me. It's Your VA Joe. So Joe is kind of the main person, and then he has a team of copywriters and designers that one of their niche really is working with therapists, therapists in private practice, but also therapists who have alternate income streams.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they're primarily helping me with that consistency part. I am the kind of person who I still am going to be writing all my own copy, at least for now, because those are my words and that's my voice. And I don't enjoy the design piece as much in terms of creating content and like things to post. And so that's something that I'm going to be handing off to them and working with them as I then continue to write the copy for it.
Other questions for Jenny? We have just a couple more minutes before we transition to our next author. Burning questions. Anything you would do differently next time around?
Well, so I would not have changed anything that I did with this one because it was a good learning experience, and I needed to make those mistakes and learn from them. That really kind of sears it into my brain. And so moving forward, you know, with Amazon, they have, because of the different kind of rules and requirements they have on you, I probably would still continue with a similar format of like 100-page book, because that's kind of like, you can just kind of get that taken care of. I think, so if I was going to do another workbook or journal, I would replicate the process so I can continue to master it. And then thinking about more like a more kind of comprehensive book about vicarious trauma and vicarious resilience, I'm going to have to do some exploration about having kind of high content books and other things that are going to go into that.
Makes sense. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here today.
Yeah.
Chris Rhino Swenson, you are the winner of Jenny's book, or books, depending on how you both want to negotiate that. So I'll make sure to connect you by email after today's event. Thank you.
Yay.
Next
Thank you
up-
all so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Next up, we have Dr. Michael Barnes. Welcome. We're excited to hear from you today.
Hi, Kara. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for being here.
I guess the name of the title of my book, excuse me, my voice. I'm just getting over a flu, so I have been, haven't been talking much in the past few days. So the title of my book is When the Solution Becomes the Problem, Helping Families Who Struggle with Addiction and Trauma. And that's an old saying in family therapy that when I sat down to start writing the book, the first words I typed on the page were, when the solution becomes the problem, because so often, families are doing whatever they can do to help this person. They love this person. And over the course of time, they begin to make decisions or adaptations that create bigger, more difficult problems in the long run. And so that's really why I have always stuck with that title, because so often in what I do, that's what I'm helping families do, is fix not necessarily the problem that they thought they had. It's interesting, students, I used to be a full-time faculty at the University of Colorado in Denver. A student asked me, why do clients change? And I said that they change whenever they realize that the problem that they've been trying to solve isn't the actual problem that they have. And so that cognitive shift. And so the book is really about all of that. It's interesting. It's an interesting story, actually. I had a friend who had written a book using a ghostwriter. And so I started meeting with a ghostwriter he suggested it. And I thought I had an idea of how I wanted it to be. And I really thought I had the voice, I had everything I wanted. And then after a short amount of work, I began to realize that wasn't at all what I wanted it to be. And I began to really struggle with this conflict that I had. Number one is, what did I think families needed to hear? Number two was, how did they need to hear it? And then my academic training was, well, but what are the expectations for how you should be saying it? And so I let that voice of my mentors in the back of my mind stop me from writing for a really long time, where I would write and throw it out and write and redo it, until I finally just decided that I know what I want it to be. I'm just going to sit down and write the book, which is exactly what I did. So what actually took about 4 years to finish was actually finished in a year. I actually rewrote the whole thing in a year and was ready to roll with that. The other thing I really learned was there's a difference between knowing the material and knowing the material. And it's one thing to be able to talk briefly about it, or to be able to give a general discussion to a client or to a family. It's another thing altogether when you're trying to make sure that it's concise and that it's well written and that it includes really accurate information. And so that was one of the things that I kind of came to very quickly, was I really know I know the material, but putting it into a format it took me a little while to get my head wrapped around it. And then once I did, I found that I was pretty good. The third thing I learned is that I wasn't a very good writer, and that I actually had some really bad habits, particularly the use of passive voice. And so that when I was editing, I had to virtually edit all 80,000 words for just sentence structure and rewriting sentences, because I was writing how I talk, and rather than writing in a more academic process. And so I wanted it to be homey. I wanted it to be something that clients and families could learn from. But I also, when I started, and I used Grammarly. I think I just found Grammarly to be really easy. It became my best friend and my worst enemy within a matter of a couple hours. And so it pointed out every sentence that I needed to rewrite. And so I learned pretty quickly how to change those around. So those were like really big things I learned in the process of from the day I wrote those words for the first time until I felt that it was actually good enough to consider. As for things like marketing, so I self-published it, and I figured that I knew that I was in the process of, my work is I develop family programs. I develop programs for families that are struggling with addiction and trauma. My research has all been in secondary trauma and what happens when a kid gets hit by a car, what happens to the family, what happens when a child has a life-threatening illness. And so those are the families that I've worked with for years. And I have a son who was hit by a car when he was 5 and is now 37. So it was sort of a passion project for me. And so I knew I was going to be working with Arizona State University, a group that they call Life Labs, to take my program national. And so I knew I needed to get the book finished to become the sort of textbook for that process. And I'm just finishing that process up in the next week or two. So that will become that'll help with book sales for sure. And so the marketing of the book itself, I needed to self-publish it. I needed it to be done fast. I used Ingram Spark. They were easy to work with. My son is sort of my business associate. He did a lot of the finding graphic artists to do the book covers and things like that. I have no idea how to do that. So he did that. He did all of my marketing, Google ads. We did some of that. That was successful, but not overly successful. And just a lot of social media, blog posts. But where I found the greatest success has been being on podcasts. And I have a list of probably 30 podcasts. And as I just do one, I scratch that one off. And I think I did 4 in the last 2 weeks. And one came out today, a podcast called Shit Talking Shrinks, with Polly Siegel, who's was a Denver person. Delightful. And we had so much fun doing it. And so and then I just go to the next one and apply. And my topic is pretty compelling, meaning people often want to hear about trauma, but they don't think about secondary trauma, and they don't think of the fact that the family members are every bit as traumatized as the trauma survivor. And so I haven't been turned down by anyone at this point. So that's been really a helpful marketing process. I was just paying attention to the questions you were asking other people and just thinking.
I appreciate that.
Did I miss any of that? Or so what other questions?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to open it up to the audience. I think the question you haven't answered yet, first, I just wanted to acknowledge the vulnerability of sharing your process with us. Thank you for
Sure.
showing that it is, in fact, a process. It's not usually like a one and done experience. And Jenny also spoke to that today. Future books in you. I think that's the question I haven't heard you answer yet.
I have a workbook that outlined, and And I have so many years ago, when the term compassion fatigue first was being evolved, I was involved in Dr. Figley's book, the first book that was written on it for therapists. He's my mentor. And so I went back on a day, I must have been really bored, and started reading my dissertation. I hadn't touched it for years. And it was really, I wanted to see what have I sort of abandoned that I believed back then, and what could I relearn in my work. And the original compassion fatigue work that we were doing, we were really looking at it from a family perspective. And then it shifted to a therapist perspective. And of course, Carla Joinson, the person that coined the term, was working with nurses in intensive care units and things. But, and so I started going back and really looking at families are experiencing significant trauma, but they're also experiencing significant amounts of burnout. And that with therapists, we see this sort of recursive process of too much burnout makes us more susceptible to more secondary trauma, or too much secondary trauma makes us. And with families, we sort of see a different process. We see a process with the more secondary trauma that families are dealing with, and that adjustment to deal with the chronic illness, the more burnout kind of is accompanied by that. And so it's a slightly different process. So I wanted to write a book on compassion fatigue from a family perspective is my next book.
Amazing. I can't wait to read it. That seems so relevant to what you just named. And I saw other people nodding here in the room of like, yep,
Yeah.
we're tracking some of that. Well, thank you, Dr. Barnes, for being here. Jenny, you
absolutely.
were actually the winner of Dr. Barnes' book, so I'll make sure you're both connected by email
Oh, yeah.
after, because you actually have some overlap, which is kind of cool. This random number
Yeah,
generator is like
awesome.
you. So that's awesome. But thank you, Dr. Barnes. Chris, you are our next author to speak today.
Okay, I'm all unmuted. Sound okay?
Sound great.
Awesome, thanks. Yes, I'm Chris Rhino Swenson, for those of you all don't know, and I absolutely just finished and released my third book just this past weekend. So I'm like, yay, go celebrate, relax now. I keep hearing the questions like, what book is next? And I can tell you, like, through the whole process, I kept having like multiple books, like, oh, this would be a good one too. Oh, this will be a good one as well. And then I'm like, stop it, focus, finish this one first, you know? And so, yes, I would go through and do a lot of that from there. And, but yeah, there might be some other options. I don't know. I'm just enjoying some little downtime for a little bit on that. But, and then before I got in, I forgot to bring my copy of the book, but I did find it on my Kindle. So if you can see it, looks like that. Yes.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm. And so I guess for me, I wanted to, this book has been almost a year, maybe a year and a half in the making, only because it really transcended a different whole format. Because originally I wanted to go with a nice, maybe 250 to 280 page big book, you know, and just really have your 12 to 14 chapters and really outline everything in there. And I started with that. I even took like a week off, went to this VRBO by myself, and all I did was be frustrated the whole time. But I came back, kept battling with it. And like many other people have talked about, when you're running your own business and other projects you have going on there, it's finding the time for it. But it was probably back around October, November, in that area. I think it wasn't quite my mom's idea. I'm not gonna let her have that. But I was writing stuff on Facebook. I just put like my thoughts, because I write all the time. It's just, I'll be up at night, ideas come, and I record them all the time. And so then I started thinking, you know, maybe I should do like kind of like a poetry and prose style book, and just put a collection of my thoughts related to a certain topic. And I went, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I saw other authors that had theirs done like that. And I really enjoyed it because it's a nice, quick read. It's also something that people can journal off of if they want to. And if they want to just pick it up whenever they need like I don't have anyone to talk to. They could pick it up and there it is. And so I was writing all these things. My mom told me, like, can you help me figure out how to print these from Facebook? If you all have parents that are up there, they don't quite know all the technology stuff. Yeah. Because she wants to put them all together so she can just have it, kind of like a book for her. And I told her, don't worry about it. They're all coming. So once I put it together, it was, for those of us who don't know, like the poetry and prose stuff, you might have like a page that has 3-4 paragraphs, and then you turn to the next page and it might have a line on there, just one line. And other times it might be a couple pages worth of stuff. And then you go to another one. And the book that I just released, Awakening a Rhino, which is your guide to resilience, healing, and thriving, has about 180 pages in it. And it's divided into the different parts of kind of like starting off basically like, what is your inner rhino, and going into the parts of what is really resilience, and going through healing and what that really looks like, and thriving, and just a lot of essays around those kind of things. The chapter I have also the part on the forge, which is I look at life like the forge of life, and we all get thrown in, and it's in that the fire gets turned up, sometimes the way our attitude is or our thoughts go. But all of these like shorter essays, sometimes statements, all allude to these very topics that kind of help people to see things in a different perspective. And what's really cool is on some of them, I actually write like a message to the reader. Like I pick a person in my mind that might be struggling with grief and loss, for example. And what would be a message I would write to them personally? And I really just played around with a lot of these messages. And I found like, man, I do this a lot of time in therapy. That I can do this here, just put it down on thoughts. And so some of the pages have these messages, whether it's grief and loss or going through a very difficult time. So my hope is at some point people could kind of mark it. Maybe they go back, take a look at it when they need to hear something really cool too, and have around. It was also a book that a lot of the audience were telling me that they wanted me to do this, like a coffee style book, I think is what a lot of them were kind of telling me, just to kind of have around. But it took a while to get all the writing, obviously, but I realized I had to compile my writing between my laptop, my iPad notes, my phone notes. I have them all over on paper and to bring all that together to basically get it into how I wanted it to. And then just to basically kind of get them into the different parts, what gets in, what doesn't, kind of re-edit them a little bit, got all that stuff done. And then I went through the Amazon KDP process. And I know when I did my first book, back in 2016, I just wanted to like learn how to do it. Like, I don't know, let's see if I can do this. And so I went through the process back then. And that had no idea that would turn out to be like my best-selling book. People were loving it. And it's actually brought in a lot of clients, a lot of people. In fact, people I don't even know have bought it. Like, and then they've told my mother, I don't know who they are, but they told her that I gave this to my son and he was in prison at the time. And he said that it not only helped him, it saved his life. And I'm like, whoa. And so sometimes it's really cool to hear those kind of things, which is why I write, to get beyond the therapy room. But that first one I just did to kind of know the process. When I did my second one, it was pretty much like I wanted to use it in a marketing way to kind of get into a niche, get on podcasts, grow an audience, maybe use it as a lead magnet. And that really worked pretty well for that. But this one's more of like, I'm actually going to write it for the people that enjoy what I write on that, rather than me just trying to figure stuff out. And I really enjoy it. But I can tell you, going through sometimes uploading it into the KDP stuff, and there's different errors. And I think if I do it again, I'm going to have someone else do that for me. It wasn't too difficult because I was fairly with it, but it's been a few years since I did it the last time, and there are changes. And so that was different. Like, whoa, what's this? And then even like, I had my cover I did myself to design for the ebook, but then you get on the paperback and I'm like, oh boy, I don't know about all these margins, this stuff. It depends on the book size. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. And nothing was working. It was like the frustrating thing. But then I just decided, I went on Fiverr.com, kind of researched some different people, found this individual who could do a turnaround in like one day. And it was phenomenal. He did a great job, real easy to go through, very inexpensive. And yeah, so definitely check out Fiverr if you need any kind of type of people to kind of design some different things. But I really enjoyed it. I'm really excited about the new book. And it's happy to be done with it for the time being. It's that idea, like people talk about giving birth to your new book, you know, and it's like, and then once I uploaded everything, it was all done and ready to go, but I was waiting on Amazon, like, go live, come on, you know? And I'm like, it's like, and I told my wife, I'm like, it's like having a child, but you can't tell anybody yet because it's not available live yet, you know? And so once it finally did, I'm like, yes. Yeah. But no, I enjoyed this. And I think kind of the writing process can be definitely challenging for a lot of people. I just think sometimes it's, you know, like I heard earlier, like it's one thing to know it, another thing to actually write about it. And I speak places all the time. So the idea is when you have to teach stuff, same thing, you have to really know it for sure. But I enjoy doing the book stuff. And it definitely leads to speaking engagements for sure. Different kind of clientele, that stuff. And then it's amazing. I get people all the time, can you sign my book and things like that, and different stuff that goes on. And there's a lot of people like, oh my gosh, you're like famous. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just wrote a book, you know? But I enjoy doing a lot of that, mostly for people that can't quite get in the therapy room. There's ways that they can get information and a lot of that stuff too. And hopefully my wife might have one coming out. She has been talking about it forever, which we all do. And she wants to do a children's book. She was out at one of her friends' place who has a bunch of baby goats. And the baby goat was called Jelly. And they bought some jammies for this goat, right? So she's like, oh, it could be jammies for Jelly. There we go. And I'm like, I know, we can do this. But yeah, she continues to talk all about it. But yeah,
That is amazing. I love all these like fun titles that people are sharing today of books, especially the children's books. That's awesome. Congrats, Chris, on book number 3. Like, I feel like you're an old hat at this now. So I have lots of little nuggets for people here on the call and for folks that are going to watch it back. And we might have time with like one question. Does anyone have a question for Chris as we're wrapping up with him? Any burning questions? I heard future books are in your list. So if you're not done writing by any means, just taking a break.
yeah, it's a tough thing because like I said, I mean, I'll be up at night sometimes pretty late and that's all I do is write. And it's just different ideas. But yeah, but it's setting on the one and staying course until it's done. That's a crucial thing.
Yep, I saw
The
people in the
titles of
chat.
your other books.
I'm sorry, I
Oh,
didn't
sorry.
quite.
I said, what are the titles of your other books?
Oh, the first one I wrote is called Rhino Life Lessons. And that one, there was a bunch of articles and stuff or just things I wrote about. And I ended up expanding on that to have a little bit further. So I narrowed it down to like 32 of them. So it's basically like 32 chapters on these different topics. And then the second one is called Private Practice Warrior, which is kind of how to win at the mental game of private practice. And that one I did a little creative with, instead of just doing nonfiction and here are the things, I wrote it like a story. And as you follow the character throughout the book, the lessons that the character learns, then you learn as well too. And then just this one now with Awaken Your Inner Rhino. So I got to decide if there's more Rhino stuff or if I'm going to continue, but we'll see. Yeah. Good question. Thank you. Yeah. And they're all on Amazon.
Yep, I just put them in the chat for folks that are here with us right now. Thank you so much, Chris, for being here. We're going to transition to our last author of the day before we hear from our final sponsor for the event. So our last author is Dr. Laura Copley, and she is on, hopefully, and can hear us.
Yeah.
So Dr. Laura, there you are. Yeah, I can see you.
Hi. So everybody gets my last name wrong. It's Laura Copley.
Dang it. It's like 50-50 for me. So sorry.
No. Of the time it's like everybody says it, but thanks for having me on, and I'm really glad that this worked out. I'm excited to be here. I guess I dive right in, right?
Yes, please.
Yeah. All right. Well, so my name is Dr. Laura Copley. I am a licensed professional counselor, and my area of specialty is trauma bonded relationships and cultivating post-traumatic growth. And I find something that's really important in my work is not just taking couples and individuals who have these attachment traumas to a level of just back to normal, that level of healing, but to cultivate what we know is that phenomenon of post-traumatic growth and being able to reach those deeper levels of meaning and appreciation for life and finding that purpose and finding different ways that we can then bring that into the relationship. So I wrote a book called Loving You is Hurting Me, and it is my unique protocol on how to work with individuals with attachment trauma. And I take them on a journey from their origin story and their family of origin through their different relationships, and then ultimately into how we can, as therapists, cultivate post-traumatic growth, both within themselves as an individual, and then experience it as a relationship as well. And the relationship I term interpersonal post-traumatic growth.
Oh, we lost your volume. Nope, still can't hear you. I can hear Chris.
Whoops.
Did you hear that? Am I coming through?
Yes, now you are.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Always on call. So what ended up happening for me is I got invited to speak at the Psychotherapy Networker Symposium a few years ago. And I presented on this topic, and just so happened that in the audience was a publisher. And the publisher sought me out after that conference and after my presentation, and she said, "This needs to be a book. Can you write me a proposal?" And so I spend the next upcoming months just entertaining the idea of how to turn this from a presentation into a self-help book. And they wanted it for, the original purpose was to write it for clinicians. And I was writing and I was telling the story, and really what my heart was guiding me in writing in the language of this is I wanted this to be a book that could be on a therapist's shelf that they would like, but they could pull off and they could say, "Hey, you need to read this." That's how I wanted the language of it to be. So I didn't want it to sound overly clinical with a lot of psychobabble and that sort of thing. I wanted it to be something that could be beneficial to therapists, but that was able to broach with the language of just feeling really emotionally engaged, that a person could pick up, a client could pick up, somebody at Barnes & Noble could pick up. People just keep calling me. And yeah, and then being able to read it as well. So I took some time and ended up getting an agent. And I signed with Distal, and they told me, "Laura, do not go with just one publisher. We need to put this book out." And one thing led to another, and this book ended up going out for a bidding war on some of the top publishers in the nation. And I ended up signing with a pretty substantial advance, which does not happen for a first-time author that often, with Hachette Book Group. It's a new imprint through Grand Central Publishing. And I worked with them, and I used that advance, or part of that advance, to go and I wrote the book in the Amalfi Coast in Italy. So I did this whole eat, pray, love kind of thing as I wrote a book. And that was a really cool journey in itself, where I could just focus on making each chapter the emotional and engaging story that I wanted it to be, without feeling so pulled in so many different directions with all the different hats that I wore. And it's really interesting because the whole process, I think, took a year, from the presentation to that author, to that publisher saying, "Hey, this needs to be a book," to the bidding war. And then a year after that, I had a book. So it happened extremely fast, and in a way that like I certainly wasn't prepared for. And now we're at the place, it was just released a couple months ago. So now we're in the place of like, well, how do I market this? Because turns out publishers aren't the best at the marketing and advertising component, which I didn't know. So I thought like, oh, they gave me this massive advance. Of course they're going to want to make their money back. But for like a baby author like me, they were just like, and good luck. So right now I'm in this place of, well, how do I promote this thing? How do I get the word out? But yeah, they have it set up. You can get through Target, you can get through Barnes and Noble, you can get through Amazon, and all those places like that. Yeah, so the book is broken up into 3 different parts. So part 1 talks about our origin story and how our origin story plays out into how we show up in relationships and the roles that we take in relationships. Part 2 of the book looks at your current adult relationships and the strategies that we can implement within our current relationships to find deeper levels of intimacy and healing. And then part 3 is on post-traumatic growth and how we can cultivate that in different sorts of ways. So yeah, that's pretty much the journey of the whole process. Man, 10 minutes goes by really fast.
It does, doesn't it?
I just felt like I was like, okay, it's been 3 minutes. No, it's been 10 minutes.
No, I
Okay.
appreciate you. I know I for lack of a better word, headhunted you on Instagram because the title is what got my attention, is hurting you or loving you is hurting me. And I was just like, oh, I love your title. So I'm just so glad you're here and can tell people what this book's about. And even your story of like, I got an advance, which as you named is like a baby author, a new author, for lack of a better word, is unusual. So I love being able to capture that here for our audience. So that's a possibility. You can go present somewhere and get a book deal.
You never, like, seriously, you never know who's sitting and who's watching. And I'm one of those stories that I'm a therapist in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. I have a small private practice, and I'm known in my community. I am the trauma specialist in my community, but one door opened at one conference, and that one presentation happened to attract one person. It was probably like it was a smaller publisher, but because I had that publisher interested, all those emails that went out and all those query letters, because I had that one interest, just catapulted me to a different level of interest from different agents and publishing houses. Because I mean, once you're desired, everybody wants to figure out the why. And yeah, it was a wild ride, exciting ride. It's not over yet because now I'm in this.
Right.
Well, I'm going back to the Psychotherapy Networker here in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be presenting on it again. And this time I'm going to have a book, and I get to do an author signing, and I get to do all the cool stuff. So that's
fun stuff.
It's a really exciting time.
Congratulations, Dr. Laura.
Thank you.
One question for Dr. Laura. Anyone have a question before we move to our last person and our wrap up today? Any final questions? Okay, well, I'll make sure everyone has a recording of the video as well, because I know we're all jumping from thing to thing, but thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
One of our authors is here that we had our wires crossed on time, so we're going to invite Uriah to come in for just a brief 5 minutes here at the end to share his book and go from there. Uriah, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
There you are. Hi.
I didn't even know we had our wires crossed. Oh no.
Oh, you're like, I'm here. And I'm like, it's the end.
Oh shoot. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for organizing this. So cool. Already I've decided I'm writing my next book on the Amalfi Coast. I mean, that sounds amazing. I wrote my book in 3 months in a cubicle in a co-working space. So like that was great, but I think Amalfi Coast sounds way better. So I'm definitely going to go back and listen to the recording because there's a lot of amazing people on this call, and it's good to see Christy and Chris. Hey. So I don't know, how to wrap this up, but I will share a little bit very briefly about my book, which is called The Productive Practice. And here's my copy. I just got a brand new cover, actually, which I'm very happy about. The subtitle is Grow Your Therapy Practice, Get More Done, and Have More Fun. And it's geared towards group practice owners, helping them to level up their personal productivity, their business organization, and then also their delegation skills. And I wrote this book to create a marketing asset for my service-based business. So I was not interested. I'm not interested in being an influencer or being like a known author. In fact, I don't want to be famous. I just want to be rich. And I don't want to have a speaking career, and I don't want to like do a book tour. I don't want to do any of those things. I'm an introvert. I would rather be in the cubicle or by myself on the Amalfi Coast. So I wanted to create a marketing asset that I could use to, yes, share valuable information and help other people be successful, because that's really what I enjoy doing. So I wanted to put the best of everything that I know and have learned and have researched and have tried into a book. And it just seemed like a good way to deliver that knowledge. Also, I'm aware that people value books and they value authors in a different way than they value even course creators or, TikTok influencers and that kind of thing. Nobody reads books. Not a lot of people read books, but they listen to books, and they value authors. So that was my intention there. And I ended up actually connecting with a company called Peaceful Profits. And I self-published, by the way. I did this myself. And I connected with a company called Peaceful Profits to get some coaching and support to write a good book, because writing a book is hard. Writing a great book is even harder. So I'm sure you all know that on some level. So I connected with them, and they have a methodology or a framework that they call the One Book Millions method. And it basically is what I said: write a book that's super valuable to a group of people that you can use as a marketing asset to get people into a sales funnel to, sell them other things that are that will solve their problems, essentially. And my business is Productive Therapist, and we provide virtual assistants to practices around the country. And it's pretty awesome. If you've never heard of it, you should check it out, productivetherapist.com. And one of the problems that we had was our sort of incoming flow of new interested practice owners was kind of variable. Some months would be great, some other months would be lower. So we wanted to create a consistent and steady flow of new people wanting to check out our services, buy our courses, etc. So I got into this program, and it was really, really helpful because I had a book writing coach that reviewed the manuscript, gave me feedback every month, had a coach to help me kind of go through the process of creating a funnel and kind of putting all the pieces together to not just like put out a book and have a launch and say, this is great, look at me, I'm an author, but actually to have something that drives growth in my business. And that's what I did. And it's going pretty well so far. And I think I probably will write another book, because the writing of the book was super hard, but having written a book is amazing. So I enjoy
That's
that.
the motivation. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah.
I think we're all like in it for at least another book from all the authors we've heard from today. So you are not alone. You are in good company.
That's great. That's great.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Riot, for being here. I'll make sure everyone has all the contact info for everybody who are authors today. With our last couple of minutes of the event, I want to introduce us to our last sponsor, our second sponsor of today's event, making it possible, which is Rich Wolf of Wolf Design and Publishing. Rich, are you here with me somewhere? I can't see you yet.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
There you are. Yeah. Hi, Rich. I'm going to screen
Hi.
share your little presentation here at the end.
Yeah,
So
thank
if you
you,
want
Cara.
to
Well,
start chatting.
while you're doing that, we're so thrilled. This is the second one of these that we've worked with you on, and it's so amazing to hear everybody's stories about their struggles with publishing, getting their books out there and published in the different topics that are out there. It's one of the things that my wife Victoria and I do through our company, Wolf Design and Marketing. We are basically a full service provider for authors. And that's kind of A to Z, everything from cover and interior design to book production, marketing campaigns and materials, author websites, book trailers, and especially author advocacy, which is helping authors make the right choices for publishing their works. And one of the things that entails is we've heard people that have been fortunate enough to get a full publishing deal, and then a lot of people here who have self-published books. I would consider everything there kind of the two ends of the spectrum. What I want to talk to you guys about today is kind of the gray area in the middle. And you'll often hear that gray area called hybrid publishing, vanity publishing, partnership publishing. And all of these questions revolve around royalties, ownership, and control. And Cara, if you could go to the next slide for me. Hit the enter button a couple of times. That looks good. Thank you. And the biggest question, whether you're a current author or whether you're getting ready to produce a book, is who owns what. And the main thing you need to own is your ISBN number. If you are not the one who has gone to the main site and registered your ISBN, then somebody else owns that. And there's a myriad of things that can happen if somebody else owns your ISBN. But know that it's something that you're not in control of. So it's something you want to check and make sure and pay for. Yes, Amazon and some of these other sites offer free ISBNs. We typically don't advise people take advantage of them because you want to own those things. The next thing is your accounts or platforms that you're on with your book. Do you own those accounts? Meaning, can you get in and see your sales? Can you see your royalties? Are you collecting 100% of your royalties, or are you paying somebody, or somebody else paying you, a third party, or are you not collecting 100% of your royalties? Hugely important that you own your accounts, and you can get that done even if you're with a hybrid publisher or a vanity publisher. You can still ask that your work be produced under your own accounts. And the reason you want to do that is because you want to be able to take advantage of the marketing opportunities that all of these different platforms have. So Ingram Spark, KDP, Drafted Digital, a lot of these places have marketing programs that you could take advantage of. If you don't own the accounts, but your books are on those programs under somebody else's account, you're not able to do that. So whether you're a current publisher or looking to publish your book, those are some of the questions you need to ask yourself. Do I own my ISBN? Can I see my sales? And am I getting 100% of my royalties? If you're not getting those things, there are some solutions that we can help you. Cara, if you could do me a favor, go to the next slide and hit the enter key one time. There we go. Most of the people here are current authors. And if you've gotten yourself into a situation where you're with a vanity or hybrid publisher and you don't own all of your things, one of the things you can do is you can publish a new version of your book. And we always like to tell authors, regardless of what the genre is of your book, whether it's fiction or you're using it for business, it's memoir, self-help, etc., is in 3 to 5 years, your book is going to start to look a little dated. Besides that, information changes quickly. You might have new discoveries, new philosophies, new things to share with your book. If you're going to put out an additional book or an updated version, that's a great way to now be in control of the ownership of the things that we've talked about. If you're a new author, once again, control your platforms. You have control over where your book is, depending on what your sales goals are. And you want to give yourself the best chance of success. And the way to do that is by owning as much of you and have as much control over your book as possible. There are approximately 2 million books that are put up on Amazon every year. So you want to be in control as much as you can to give your book the best visibility that you can. And Kari, you want to go to that last slide? So one of the things that we do, and if you could hit the enter key one more time, yep, there we go. One of the biggest things we do is author advocacy. And the biggest thing about author advocacy is we help authors make decisions for their goals and objectives, not the publisher's best interest. So even if you decide you want to go a hybrid route, it's good to talk to an author advocate just to find out the pros and cons of the decisions that you have to make in the publishing process. So we offer free consultations with people to talk about books and put a package together for you that, once again, is designed for your goals and objectives. So I would love the opportunity to talk to anybody, whether you have a current book or are looking to do a book for your first time. And Kara, once again, thank you so much for allowing us to help you with this. And yeah, we look forward to talking to anybody who needs help with a book. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, thank you, Rich, so much. I've worked with Rich personally, so of course I always ask him to come back to events because I trust him. So when we were talking earlier in this event about keywords, Rich is my go-to person for keywords to rank books as bestsellers. He does that research, gets you what you need, and you're off and running. So I hope you'll take advantage of Rich and have a chance to talk to him a little further about how his company can help you. And here we are at the end of our event. So thank you all so much for hanging in there with me and learning from these amazing powerhouse therapists, professionals, authors. I think we're all addicted to books now. We have lots of books to read. So I will see you in a future event. Thank you so much for being here, everyone. Take care.